All right, welcome back. Well, yes, we've got Mr. Tony Ojukwu, CFR. He is the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission. He's also a Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Oh, that's yeah, sorry.
OFR, not CFR.
OFR.
Yes.
So congratulations on both ends anyways.
Thank you, Chamberlain.
That is in order.
Thank you.
But talking about this answers, I haven't seen where we are 2 years on. Because you occupy a vantage position having to do with several petitions and all what's going on about human rights. Have you seen a fundamental change 2 years on?
Well, I would say we have made some progress. We are not where we were before. At least the panels have sat all over 29 states and concluded their findings. But we need to do more than that. For instance, the various states have not paid compensation. It's only the Lagos State government and the National Human Rights Commission that have paid compensation. They seem to be waiting for the federal government, and I don't think they should, because these are citizens of their states, and the police was serving the state government while these violations occurred. And in other spheres, like road construction and so on and so forth, state governments do take on this and then claim money from the federal government later. So I don't see why.
I see that there's been some controversy around that. I mean, with the panels that have been set up and the fact that, compensation has not been paid. I would like us to, delve into that a little more much later. But I noticed that the very first question which Chamberlain asked you as to whether, we have made progress. You've chosen your words very carefully. I see that you're a bit reluctant to know how to touch on that. You say we've made some progress in some areas. But really, the question is, has anything changed with police brutality? That's a key question. Yes, we know that SARS was disbanded, but, in its place, what has now been erected? And as a whole, has our police force undergone a reorientation?
There is no doubt that there is still police brutality. And I believe that there's nowhere in the world you will not see police brutality. What we should clamor for is accountability for it. Because I don't think there will ever be a time in world history, either in Nigeria or anywhere, that you will not experience brutality. But the difference here is that if people brutalize people, they should be held accountable. That is the challenging point in our own polity. So, and what we are striving to do is that all those who are involved in police brutality are held accountable. That's the point I was trying to make. Because I cannot say here and tell you as a human rights person that it's possible that there will never be police brutality, because the Inspector General of Police will give instructions, but the people who are going to carry it out will do what they want to do anyway.
I imagine that in the aftermath of that, of the NSAS protest, particularly looking at, just what happened afterwards, the carnage that was witnessed in many parts of the country, police stations also were not spared, and even police personnel too also lost their lives. We saw that at some point it would seem that they were totally demoralized, even though those who were clamoring for a change in terms of, were clamoring for, let's say, the eradication of police brutality, also at some point began to realize that even the police themselves were victims. But when the carnage eventually happened, there was no differentiation between who was police, who was an ordinary civilian, who, it affected almost everybody. Businesses were affected, etc. Now, I imagine that as a result of that, there might have been some, let's say, conflict or a strain between how the police was perceived and how it does and how it did its work within the civil public which it was meant to serve. For you as someone who, you know, strides both worlds, because Human Rights Commission is also a government agency, but you have a duty to protect human rights, and you understand just where the protests, you know, were coming from. How have you been able to, would you say that there was a need for a reconciliation between the police and the people to understand basically what went wrong and perhaps move forward from there? Has anything of the sort happened?
Yeah, that's the whole idea of police reforms, right? I mean, after the NSAS, it was agreed that there has to be holistic police reforms, which will involve retraining them, which will involve improving their welfare, which will involve accountability, which will involve, you know, providing the equipment with which they have to do their work. For instance, the issue of torture at times is, you know, propelled by maybe lack of forensics to be able to analyze offenses or crimes, and then in order to force people to confess. Because, for instance, if there was common CCTV camera in a venue or in a venue where crime was committed, you know, it demystifies the whole thing, because you will not be denying what has been shown on the camera. So, and when that happens, and the police does not have that facility, you know.
That's not quite the question I'm asking. So yes, police reforms, it can happen, that conversation can happen within the police and maybe even in the general larger public. But I'm looking at the
issue of reconciling the people
exactly,
with the
the reconciliation that ought to have happened after what we witnessed 2 years ago between, I don't know, let's say between the police and the public, which it was meant to serve.
Well, you see, like, there's a policy of community policing. That is what it's all about, that the people should be involved in their protection at all levels. And the community policing program is going on, maybe not at the rate we would expect, maybe not, but you see, really, the differences between the people and the police is really entrenched. It's not a day's problem. It's a big challenge.
But Mr. Jugu, there's something I've been struggling to wrap my head around. I read the piece where you said that the NHRC receives, I think you said about 1 million cases.
1.7 million as at last year.
As at last year?
Yeah.
What's the frequency? Is that annually or something?
Annually, yeah.
Annually?
Yeah.
Wow. How can that be?
Is it just the police? Brutality?
No. General complaints on human rights violation, yeah, not only the police. That includes complaints on issues of economic, social, and cultural rights, complaints from women and children, complaints from vulnerable groups, and then complaints from civil and political rights, which are mainly, that's from law enforcement agencies, cutting across police, civil defense, road safety, and everybody.
Yeah.
Wow.
You have admitted that police brutality might not be totally eradicated, but of course we want to be able to see it come down to the barest minimum, and that when it happens, you know, people are held accountable. I mean, that's, I believe, is the goal right now. But even in terms of bringing it down, would you say that there has been any change whatsoever in terms of how the police is now structured and how it carries out its work?
Well, I must tell you that, you know, at times this job is very frustrating, because it does seem as if there is no visible change in the way the police carries out its functions. However, we have come across cases where police officers have told us, we know you are here to monitor us. So to that extent, that means some of them have at the back of their mind that there is a Human Rights Commission that will probably go after them. Now, what we think going forward is that it's not enough to just have a one-off NSAS panel. And part of the recommendations which we made to government, which government accepted, is that there should be a permanent mechanism for dealing with these accountability cases. It is important that every police officer who is out there must know, as long as you are free to behave how you like, but know that somebody is going to come after you. We think that if that is maintained for a reasonable length of time, it will dawn on any police officer that it's no longer business as usual. And that is the level where we reach, and it will start being effective. So this one-off panels is not going to solve the problem. What will solve the problem is that we are going to start off another set of panel hearings on brutality, because since after we collected those information, brutality has continued. So are those ones going to go scot-free? No. Wow. So we need to start another panel that will now look at the cases that has happened in recent times, so that people out there will know that any day you commit brutality, your day of recording is coming.
So apart from compensation that was paid, sorry, Chimole, paid to the people who, you know, came to complain, a number of them got some compensation, at least some amount of money. Some people will say that, you know, for those who lost their lives or who have lost their livelihoods or are unable to work, you know, the amounts of money that were paid were really not commensurate. In some instances, it was just an acknowledgement and maybe the state trying to apologize as to what people have gone through. But for those who were the perpetrators of this act of brutality, what happened to them? Are they being prosecuted? I mean, are they facing any justice on any front?
Yeah, that was why what I was trying to explain initially, that there are stages. Now, after the panels have sat and indicted certain officers, you know, you cannot prosecute an officer unless you dismiss the officer. Now, this has to go to Police Service Commission that has the mandate to discipline police officers. It will now formally try them, give them fair hearing, and dismiss them, and then hand them over for prosecution.
That process hasn't started?
It has started. The process has started. But
where are we in that process?
Well, at least the communication of the indicted officers has been communicated to them. So we now expect them to use their internal mechanisms, because there are internal mechanisms to discipline officers. You have to query them, they have to answer those queries, it has to be investigated. Then, like, all our findings may not be perfect. It may not be perfect.
You know what, when you also spoke about those states who have not paid any compensation, maybe they're waiting for the federal government. I mean, some of them, I think Rivers was quoted to have said, well, I didn't say that I was going to pay compensation. We don't know if that means he will not pay eventually. How is that? Do you get any indication that they eventually or look forward to be, because look, we're in an election year, some of them will be gone. Another government comes in, we don't know what happens to that. So what should the approach be to ensure that something is done about that?
You recall that the setting up of the SARS panels nationwide was as a result of the decision of the National Economic Council.
Yeah.
And now, now that we have concluded the panel sittings, we have asked all the states to send in their reports. And we want to take this back to the National Economic Council and tell them, yes, this stage of sitting has finished. This is a summary of the indictment. This is a summary of the compensation to be paid, and we'll watch what next they're going to do. So I think it lies in the purview of the National Economic Council to direct the states on what to do.
There was one particular item which you said that the NHRC was going to see or ensure that, I think, compensation is paid to some of this. Is this matter?
Yes,
is
that is part of it, because, I mean, as the Human Rights Commission, these are human rights issues. I mean, I'll be failing in my duty if I don't pursue this. So we are committed to making sure that all these panel recommendations are taken up to appropriate quotas. We don't have the money. It is government that has to provide the money.
But if there's one, if there can be one major thing that you'd like to see change, either implemented at either the federal or state level to speak to the heart of this matter, what would that be?
It would be to really prosecute these officers, because that is the thing that can help us to change the system. Officers who have been indicted, is not enough to pay compensation. Yes, compensation is a good gesture. Don't forget that this is the first time compensation is being paid for human rights violations. So that's a quantum leap. We can't take that away. However, we can't stop at that. We would want to see that these people who have been indicted for police brutality are really, prosecuted or dismissed or disciplined. And you remember, even the Anti-Torture Act, which has been passed, now makes using torture for investigation a crime. So there's no reason why any officer who has tortured, the law is there now. It wasn't there before 2017, but the Anti-Torture Act is now in place. So any police officer who is indicted for torture must, by our law, be prosecuted for it. And that is what we're expecting that should happen.
And maybe they might even need to have a second look at that law, because some may hide behind that law saying it's a lot of process bureaucratically to fire an officer, then come to prosecution. So who knows? But at the end of the day, it's an ongoing conversation, and we'll keep tabs on it and hope that the best things are done for this country, as a matter of fact. Thank you for coming on, Tony Ojukwu, Executive Secretary, National Human Rights Commission. That C looks like, you know, C and O, they can be deceptive. However, as Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.